Okay, so our first few labs here are going to be completely online since we're not going to have any face-to-face labs until March 1st. This lab has a quiz to go with it, which you'll find posted on Blackboard along with the Dropbox on Blackboard where you can turn this in. Um, the lab numbers correspond to the number in your lab book, not the week. So lab 2 is lab 2 in your lab book. I'm also going to post the pages from that lab because I know it's with the way the bookstore is now, it's kind of difficult to get your lab book in a timely manner. So for those of you who don't have the lab book yet, I'm going to post PDFs of those pages. But by March 1st, you will need to have a physical copy of the lab book to bring into class with you. So after this week's lab, you have a few weeks to work on getting that lab book. So let's talk about scientific sources. So when a scientist does research, whether they're doing experiments or whether they're collecting observational data, they need to report that information to the scientific community. So they write up a research paper. And sometimes these are also called journal articles. Um, so an original research paper, one of the ways that you can tell that it's an original research paper is because it contains data. It has a results section, it has graphs, it has reported new data. If it doesn't contain new data, if it's a summary of data from other sources, it might be a scientific source, but it's not an original research paper. And one of the things that you're going to do as part of your lab report for this lab is to find an original research article. And it can be hard to distinguish this from other sources. So an original research article, besides having new data, it also must be in a peer-reviewed publication. There are thousands of peer-reviewed scientific journals. There are medical journals that are peer-reviewed, like the Journal of the American Medical Association, and the Lancet is the British version of that. There are thousands of these journals, and some of them are general, like the journal Nature or the journal Science, and some of them are very specific to a particular field. There are Not every peer-reviewed journal is equal in terms of credibility. There are a lot of kind of fake journals that do sort of have peer review, but they're not very reliable. They're essentially advertisements where people can just pay to get an article published in there. So you can find out about that too by looking at the Wikipedia article about a particular journal. They will have its how often papers in that journal are cited in other research papers, and that will give you an idea of that's called the impact. And some of these pseudo journals, have like no impact because they're not, although they are technically peer reviewed, they're not very reliable. There are thousands of really good peer reviewed science and medical journals, however. So the next level down in the hierarchy is things that are not reporting new data, but they're compiling recent data from other scientific articles. So these are either called review articles or meta-analyses. Sometimes it'll be labeled a review article and then it will also say this is a meta-analysis. So a review article takes recent findings in some specific field and summarizes them. Review articles are great if you're new to a field, if you want to learn more information about a specific area that you're not very familiar with. If you find a review article on that topic, that can be a great source because review articles are generally in scientific journals. They are also peer reviewed. Oh, let's talk about what peer review means too. So a peer of anybody is somebody like them. So for scientists, peers would be other scientists in your own field. So when you submit a paper to a scientific journal, they send it out to be reviewed by other scientists in the same field. Somebody who could read the data and have a good idea of whether the experiments were done well if they're reported correctly. So that's what peer review means. Usually a good journal will submit articles to at least 2 or 3 reviewers. If it's a controversial topic, they might send it to 5 or 6 reviewers to get opinions before they publish it. So that's what peer reviewed means. It means other scientists read it and evaluate it before it gets published. So review articles and meta-analyses published in scientific journals are also peer-reviewed, but the difference is they contain no new data. They are they're a summary or a synthesis of recent data in a particular field. And they can be really useful. One that I read recently, I read a review article on what do we know so far about COVID-19? And it summarized data from dozens of recently published scientific articles and put it all in one place and explained it really well and cited all the sources. So if I wanted to go find one of those particular sources, I could. The next level down of good scientific information would be a textbook or a Wikipedia article. Textbooks are generally written, scientific textbooks anyway, are mostly written by scientists. Usually each chapter might be written by a different person. You'll notice that usually science textbooks have multiple authors, and that's because each person writes the bits that they're an expert on. And they cite all their sources, usually at the end of every chapter or sometimes at the end of the whole book. They'll cite references for almost everything in the entire book. So if you wanted to go read more about a specific area or find out where did they get that exact piece of information, you could find it. Many of you were warned off of Wikipedia in high school, but actually Wikipedia is great. Wikipedia is like a free textbook. At least for all of the science information, it's pretty hard to become a Wikipedia science editor. They're vetted, making sure that they actually have degrees in the fields that they're going to be editing. Other editors keep an eye on everything a new editor does for a while to make sure that they're doing things correctly before they let them like freely edit. So science in Wikipedia is as trustworthy as a published textbook from Pearson or McGraw-Hill or any of the big publishers. So use Wikipedia. Think of it like your free textbook. I use Wikipedia all the time to look up things that I don't know enough about, and it's a great source. Wikipedia, one of the ways you can also tell Wikipedia is a reliable source is because they cite all their sources. At the end of every Wikipedia article, there is endnotes. There is a list of all the sources, and if the sources are not there, there'll be a little note in there saying, source needed. Someone please help us out, add the source here. Where is this piece of information from? So Wikipedia is good, and that's a good, reliable, think of it as just as reliable as any published textbook from a big publication company. The next level down in reliability would be news articles from large news outlets like the Chicago Tribune or CNN, or science magazines, magazines that don't publish new data, but they're dedicated to reporting scientific discoveries. Like one of them is, Science News, it's called. There's Scientific American, which you might have heard about. And these often have opinion pieces as well and editorials. But they're not reporting new data. These science magazines like Science News or Scientific American, they don't have any original research papers in them. They are reporting discoveries of other people. And one of the reasons, one of the ways you can tell how reliable any particular article is do they give you enough information to find the original research? So if they're telling you, oh, there's a new study, showing that, 5% of children are going to get really sick from COVID-19. How can I find that article? If they say, oh, this treatment works or that, where's the article? Do they give you the scientist's name, the name of the journal, what year it was published? Do they give you enough information to find that research paper? If they don't, be suspicious. Any news source that gives you a piece of scientific information, this treatment is good, this has been discovered, but gives you zero information on how to find that, be suspicious, especially if it's new, because any reliable source like a newspaper or a news outlet, they'll at least give you the name of the scientist, the university where the research was done, the name of the journal. They'll say, you know, published this week in the journal Cell is an article on blah, blah, blah. Well, if they tell you it's in this week's Cell, you could find it. If you know the topic and the journal and the week it was published, you could find it. So do they give you enough information? If they don't give you enough information, be skeptical. Our lowest level and the things you should always treat skeptically would be blogs. So that's something that's written by one person with no editors, nobody checking their sources. And many blogs look like news articles. They try to put themselves up in the higher category, and they try to make their blog look like it's a reputable news outlet. But many of them, if you've never heard of it, it might just be one person doing it, or sometimes it's even an advertising company that's putting out this blog to make it look like something is an effective treatment, and it's actually has no basis in science whatsoever. YouTube videos, documentaries, again, if it's a good, reliable source, they will give you the citation in that, either in the YouTube video itself or in the comments. There's a doctor that I watch on YouTube, this British doctor who talks about the latest discoveries for COVID-19 every week. He does 1 or 2 videos a week, and he always gives you the citation. He shows you the endnote, the journal, the authors, you know, where it was published, how to find it, right in the video. And then he talks about what's in that research paper. So be suspicious if they're making scientific claims and they give you no way to verify it or tell you where they got that information. And, you know, all social media is suspect in that same way. We are awash in pseudoscience and false claims in social media. There's also some really good stuff there too, but that's the key. Can you trace it back? Can you trace it back to the original research article? If they don't give you any information on how to find the original research article, be skeptical of whatever they claim in that. So the lab book itself, I know you may not have the lab book yet. That's okay. You will have to get it sometime this week. In Lab 2, it gives specific descriptions of the parts of a scientific paper, the abstract, introduction, methods, results, and discussion, and use that information to answer those specific questions on the quiz. I already mentioned citations, and that a good article, whether it's a review article, an original research paper, or a news article, is going to give you citations that allow you to find the original research paper. In the scientific papers themselves, whether it's the original research paper, the review article, a meta-analysis, they're going to give you endnotes. That's almost completely universal in science, that scientists use endnotes. So an endnote is sort of the same idea as a footnote, but they're all at the end, and they're for the entire paper. So a footnote might have numbers or asterisks, and then the notes are down at the bottom of the page. Endnotes use the same idea, but they're all numbered and they're all at the end. And the big advantage is each reference is only listed once, because for a scientific paper, you might have 50 to 100 citations. And if you have to list those at the bottom of the page in a footnote, or you're just going to list them generally at the end, like in a bibliography, that is not enough. And we only want to list each one once. So if every time you cite the same source, you use the same number. You don't have to list it multiple times. So that's a big advantage of endnotes over any other kind of citation. So that's the first purpose of the EndNote. The first purpose is to give credit to the source article. Anything in your scientific paper that did not come out of your own brain needs a citation, even if it's something that the author themselves previously published. Some authors have gotten in trouble for repeating things in their introduction that they said in an introduction to a paper a year before, and it was their own article, and they said, no, you still have to cite it because it's published. The second reason, and this is really important, especially in science, and that is that it allows readers to find the exact source. Because in science, very often when you're reading somebody's scientific paper, in the introduction where it has the background, they'll, oh, I didn't know that. Where did they get that piece of information? I want to go read that paper too. And then you can just look in the endnotes and find the exact paper and then go read that source as well. So that's the two purposes. Credit the author and also to allow your readers of your scientific paper to go and find the exact source of where you got it. And that's really important. Now, generally, EndNotes for books, especially scientific books, EndNotes are often for actual notes, like extra information that they didn't want to put in the paper to clutter it up. And I've seen this in scientific books where the EndNote might have, you know, some description of something that, or a little story about something that they didn't want to clutter up the book with. That's not one of the main reasons for an endnote, though, in a scientific paper. You almost never see notes like that in a scientific paper. Endnotes in a scientific paper are almost 100% of the time citations of other research articles. So let's look at endnotes here. So the top here is an introduction that I screenshotted out of a scientific paper. And here the format, here's our endnotes. They're just numbers. And this is from the introduction, so that's why the numbers start with 1. This isn't even the first paragraph of the introduction. I think this is the second paragraph. But then if we look down, this is the endnotes from the same paper. So 1, we can look down and see exactly where they got this information that vitamin A can have acute toxic effects leading to liver toxicity. Where did they get that? Oh, here's the article that they got it from. And then, you know, the second one, chronic high levels can have a pro-oxidant effect. Oh, that doesn't sound good. That must be bad. All right, here, where did they get that? Okay, that's from the journal Science. And so right away, oh, that's a prestigious journal. So this is a reliable source. An unusual type of lipid antioxidant. And then it tells you exactly how to find it. And actually, I did a screenshot of this. So these are clickable links. This PubMed and Google Scholar are clickable links that you could go directly to that article and read it. So that's an even nicer thing that we have now. And in the paper, the endnotes are also clickable links, so you could click the number 1 and it would buzz you down to the end here so that you could see the name of the article. So, but this is the format, and this is the format that you're going to use for your article. So you're going to find an original research article on a topic of your choosing, and make sure that you find an original research article because I'm going to look it up too. Find an original research article and give me the citation. So this second one here has the typical format here, authors' names, and then the exact title of the article, the journal, the year, the volume 224, and the pages. That's a citation. This tells me exactly where to find it. And make sure that you're not citing news articles or review articles. I want you to make sure that it's not a review article or a news article, that it's a original scientific paper that has data. So look at the article. Does it have a results section? Does it report original data, new data? That's the way to tell that it's an original research article. Also, research articles usually have lots of authors these days. It's very rare to see a scientific article that's got one author. So if you have an article that you're looking at and it has a single author, it's very likely it's a review article or it's a news article and it's not actually an original research article. So keep those things in mind. You're going to use the COD research database in order to find your research article. You can also use Google Scholar, which is, if you've never used Google Scholar, I'm going to show you how to do both of those things next. Okay, let's look at a few search methods for finding your scientific research paper. So you're going to pick a topic that you're interested in, and I assume there's some topic in biology or medicine that you're interested in, and that's why you're in this class. So pick a topic that you're interested in, and it could be a fairly broad topic, and there's two different types of search. One is the, Google Scholar. I'll show you how to use that. And then also the databases that go along with our library. And I'll show you how to do that too. So if you've never used Google Scholar it works like Google. And so it puts things with lots of clicks up to the top. So you're going to have to be real specific if you're going to find a paper that's not, that wouldn't have a lot of clicks. And it's going to come up with original research papers, review articles, news articles even about specific scientific research, news articles that are found in scientific journals. And it's mostly going to be limited to peer-reviewed journals, which is what we want. So let's pick a topic here. So I'm just picking a recent topic that I searched on, and that was the MMR vaccine and its possible protective effects in case of COVID. So, and you'll see that this looks a little bit different than when you use Google. So here's a news article, and I can tell that this one here is a newsy article because of the title. The title doesn't sound very technical, and that's usually an indication that this is either a review article or a news article from a scientific journal. So I'm going to skip that one. Let's see here. Okay, so here's the one that I was looking at earlier. This one was published in November, and I'm going to click on this one here. So when you get to the article, we can see that there's a lot of authors, and you don't have to write out every author in your citation when you write out the citation. Usually if there's more than 2 authors, we only put the first author, so you'd put Gold, comma, Jeffrey, and then et al, E-T-A-L. And et al just means and all the rest, and all the others in Latin. So, and let's see, we're going to try to figure out, is this an original research paper or is this a review article? So review articles often also have an abstract. An abstract, again, is a very detailed summary. And I already see data in here in the abstract. So that's a good sign that this is actually an original research article. So what was the journal here? So this is a publication by the American Society for Microbiology, but that's not the name of the journal. Let's see. Oh, it actually says right here, research article. They don't always say that. So that's a good indication that that's what it is. So the name of the journal, let's see, is it Therapeutics and Prevention? No. Oh, it's just molecular biology here, or microbiology. I think that's what the M stands for, because it's coming from the Society for Microbiology. So that's probably the name of the journal, is Microbiology. And that's a peer-reviewed journal. So now we're going to look for, before we even read it, we're going to look for a results section. And this, in fact, has a results section with data. And they don't refer to other papers. So in review articles, they will often show the data, but it will have an endnote going to the original paper. So this one doesn't. So it's reporting data. Here's a data table. And you see there's no citation here. There's no endnote, which tells us that this is original data. There is no citation because this is the first time this data has ever been published. So that's good. So that means that this is an original research paper. So you can't use this one for your paper. Find a different one. But it has lots of data, and then there's a discussion here. And you'll notice the discussion does have endnotes, and in this particular one, these are clickable. And one nice thing is that a lot of these journals would have had a paywall previously, but most journals now, anything that has to do with COVID, they've eliminated the paywall and let anybody look at the whole paper, which I think they should just do that from now on for everything instead of having a paywall. But you see these numbers? These are endnotes, and they're actually clickable links. I'm not clicking on them, but then the name of the paper from the endnotes pops up if you hover over the number. But you can see there's lots and lots of those. And here's their materials and methods, which are fairly detailed. So that's another sign. A review paper, a review article, or a news article, it's not going to have a materials and methods section because they didn't do anything. They just compiled data from other papers. We'll go down to the bottom here. And there's all our numbered references. And these are, it doesn't say endnotes, but these are endnotes. That's what they are. So each one, even if it's referenced more than one time, will use the same number. And then these are actually clickable links as well, which is really nice. One of my favorite things about the internet, because back when I was a graduate student, if we found a paper mentioned in a introduction or something like these references here, if we wanted to go read that, we would have to go to the library, find the journal, go to the copy machine, copy that paper, or read it right there and take notes, because we couldn't take the journals out of the library. And then if your library didn't have that particular journal, that's it, you can't read it. So now we can read anything. And if you do hit a paywall using Google Scholar, try searching for the same paper through the COD database. They have a huge subscription base for medical and biological related journals. I've only found a couple of times that there was a journal article that I wanted to read that the journal wasn't available through COD so that I could see the entire article. Okay, so that's one way. You can use Google Scholar, but you may encounter paywalls where you can only see the abstract. Usually you can always see the abstract, but then you might hit a paywall, and sometimes they ask for ridiculous amount of money to see the entire article, like $30 or $40. So that's the case. If you know the author's name or the title, exact title of the article, you can go to College of DuPage, click on the library down here, and on the library page, if you come under search here, it's not popping up right now. There's a thing that says databases. So click on the databases, and then you can go to health and medicine or science. They're going to pull up slightly different subsets of the databases. But the one that I would recommend is Academic Search Complete, which I've already clicked on here in the next tab. And then we can try to find an article. And if you know the exact title of the article, you're going to be able to find it. If you know, so you can change here if you want it to be author, if you know the author's name, you can put that in. And that'll help you narrow it down. But let's see if this is going to work here. See if I can find the same article this way. Now, sometimes this is a little bit more fiddly. You have to be more exact. Google Scholar will tolerate misspellings and will try to guess what word you were trying to spell. This won't. If you spell a word wrong, it's going to pop up and say no results. So sometimes I start with Google Scholar to see what's available, and then I go here to see the whole paper. So let's see what it's going to find here. Oh, I didn't click on, I want only scholarly articles. I only want peer-reviewed journals. I don't want to get books, newspaper articles, because this will find all that. This will find textbooks, videos, articles from newspapers, and if you want to eliminate all that and just search journals, then just click this box down here. See, I'm doing something wrong here. Okay, so there's too many words here. So let's try MMR and COVID and see what we find. Oh, let's try. It doesn't like acronyms either. There we go. So see, I had to change my search. Putting in MMR, that's an acronym, it didn't like that. And so, and it oftentimes depends on how they code it, what keywords they code as search terms. And this is also, you'll find out that maybe something has a different name than what you think it does. And you have to put in the right word for it to get your article to come up. And so not all of these are going to be original research articles, but they're all going to be published in peer-reviewed journals because I clicked that box. So this one looks like it might be a research article. Another way to tell if it's not a research article is if there's only one author. So this paper only has a single author, and it doesn't sound like a research article. It sounds like a news article. So I'm going to guess that this is a news article in a scientific journal, and that's why that's coming up. So yeah, see, my article didn't come up with that search. So that means that either mumps or COVID, or both of these, are not search terms for that particular article. So I could go back and look at the author and then try to find it that way, which is probably a good idea, or look at if I know the exact title. So use these two sources, and for the quiz, you're going to find one original research article and cite it. It doesn't have to be exactly the same citation format, but I need the first author, at least, with an et al., the full and exact title. That's really important. The year, the journal, the volume number. Those are very important. If it doesn't have a journal name, then if it's like a title of a book or something, then it's not an original research paper. Original research is never published in book form or in a news article form. And make sure it's not a review article. So a review article doesn't have new stuff in it. It will be what looks like the results section will actually be loaded with citations to the papers that they got that information from. Because a review article takes the newest, most recent research in some specific area and summarizes it and puts it all into one place. So watch out for that as well. Okay, so that's what we're doing for Lab 1. Use your lab book to complete sections of the quiz. And I will see you in class next week. Well, not in class, but online in Collaborate Ultra.